Trust, hello, mad ones. I got a horse in my lap. It's Henry Horse, not an actual horse. I think you hopefully realize that if it were a real horse in my lap, I wouldn't be able to make this podcast very long. Horses are large, they're very heavy. I just banged my head right before the podcast began. I was trying to reach down to take a hit of this nootropic mind expander nootropic vape I was given at like a wellness event. You know, wellness is going too far when they're getting into the vape game now, but they convinced me it might be valuable, and I dropped it on the way to hitting it, and I hit my head on the corner of my computer. And so, is my mind expanded now? Is it weaker? Are we in a strange place mentally? Probably all of the above, to be honest with you. I don't know if I can guarantee lucid thinking during this podcast. I will do my best. I'm not going to try to tank it or anything. I hope you had a great week during this last week on Earth. I know I did. And by great, I mean it was jam packed. Very nice. My Saturday was the most jam packed of all Saturdays you could imagine. I woke up at my home in the valley and then drove to a very different part of the valley to drop off Henry Horse at the dog sitter. Then drove all the way to Silver Lake, the opposite end of town, to work on my ending special with a friend of mine whose comedy I really respect. And then I drove all the way to Pacific Palisades, like an hour drive other side of LA, to go to a wedding, Caroline Demore's wedding, the pizza girl. Check out her new shop in Venice. And to a lifetime of happiness to her and Omer. Beautiful wedding. And had to leave that early to go all the way back to the other side of LA to Hollywood to headline a charity event for the Assistance League of Los Angeles to help raise over $10,000 for their really big shoe event to buy brand new shoes for children in need around LA. And then went all the way across LA again to Venice to a friend's pre-Burning Man party, even though I have to skip the burn this year because I'm so focused on the podcast and on my upcoming special, Endings, filming September 21st. I already told you about it at Hotel Cafe in Hollywood. If you want tickets, you can get them at benglebe.com or thehotelcafe.com. But since I always like to hook up my listeners of this podcast, if you DM me on Instagram, I'm going to give you 25% off link so that you can attend the taping in person, early or late show, for 25% off. Don't say I never did nothing for you. This podcast is free. Also keep that in mind. Would love the support. Want to make sure they're packed out. So my friend's like, come to this party. It's still going strong, even though I was only going to be heading there around 1 a.m. She's like, it's going strong. As I'm walking up, an exodus of like 15 people leave, and it was me and 4 other people. And I wish that stopped me, but I still partied my bones off. We laughed a ton. It was great. I danced. I ended up telling a story about Rice Krispie treats that made me on the way home stop at a 7-Eleven for Rice Krispie treats. And the official Rice Krispie treats are nowhere near as good, turns out, as like the homemade ones. Maybe I should have known that. Then drove back to the valley. Probably 5 hours of driving within one city in one day. But worth it. Good times. I also went to the incredible Nova exhibit opening event last week, and it was incredible. The Nova exhibit came from Israel and then to New York and then to LA now. You can go to novaexhibition.com, but you should go check it out. It's free. It's very moving no matter where you fall in this crazy war in the Middle East. I think it's very important to put yourself in the shoes of all people, and it's a beautiful, touching, moving, sad, but hopeful in some ways as well exhibit, and I think it can be very mind shifting to anyone. I recommend it. We always start with the biggest news story of the week. So let's get into it right now. I don't know how to overstate the gravity of this. There's no way to break this to you in any way less intensely, but construction has begun at Kim Kardashian's upcoming Skims in West Hollywood, according to WeHo Times. She's doing a huge Super Skims store in West Hollywood. A fence has gone up around the 5,600 square foot space. Construction workers were seen working on the project on Monday. And this is very exciting because people of all shapes and sizes are going to be able to smash themselves into Kim Kardashian inspired clothing. There's smashers, there's shapers, there's scoopers, there's lifters, there's dunkers. These are the official names that I'm making up and I assume are correct. Uh, Great product, Justine Marino. Obsessed with Skims. They really help people of all kinds do all kinds of things. There's also Skims for men. If it weren't for Skims for men, I wouldn't be able to present my balls to the world as beautifully as I do. And so I thank Skims for the ball lift underwear they've been providing to me for a long time. If you'd like your own ball lifters, use promo code BALLLIFT, CO Glebe, care of Glebe, at skims.com. And they charge you extra if you do that. You get a $5 surcharge for using that promo code and a code, so I hope you do. The fence around Skims was decorated with various mushrooms. Nobody knows the connection between mushrooms and Skims other than the fact that probably a lot of her ideas come on hallucinogenics. She, however, doesn't come on hallucinogenics. It's hard for most of us. Of course, they're going to attract its share of critics. A lot of people in West Hollywood West Hollywood do not want Kim Kardashian's store to be there. They don't want them ruining the neighborhood. And this is a neighborhood known for blowjobs and cars on the side of the road. This is just a fact about West Hollywood. So when you're making that community wonder whether or not they want you in town, maybe, work on your public image. But we again thank them for their sponsorship. Shapewear is important so you can, again, twist yourself into different shapes, kind of like a Slinky or a Rubik's Cube or like a Play-Doh person. You can just shape shift at all times, and I think that's beautiful. Meth is not a watermelon. I think you and I both knew that intrinsically, but border agents sometimes are confused. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers in Southern California discovered that a supposed watermelon shipment was not what it seemed. They uncovered more than $5 million worth of methamphetamine concealed inside. A 29-year-old man driving a commercial tractor trailer attempted to enter the United States from Mexico with a shipment manifested for watermelons. But apparently, the officers discovered 1,220 packages of methamphetamine wrapped in paper and then in plastic disguised as the fruit. The contents weighed nearly 4,600 pounds, and that's a lot to count if you're high. So hopefully the officers themselves were sober as well as the driver. You don't want to get high on your own supply, is the old saying. And you got to follow sayings. I've said this from the beginning. Earlier this month, CBP officers in Otay Mesa intercepted 629 pounds of methamphetamine with an estimated street value of $755,000 that was hidden within a celery shipment. So people really going fruits and veggies to cover up their meth. And I don't know, go something more fun. Go hide it amongst meat. Maybe hide it amongst candy, something that's a little more similar, like a vice kind of an item. Putting it among fruit and vegetables, like, people are going to be like, really? Is the demand that high for celery? Let's take a look in that truck. Sadly, meth and other synthetic stimulants were responsible for approximately 30% of the nearly 108,000 drug-related deaths in 2022, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So we got to cut this problem out, and stopping celery from coming across the border is a major way to do it. Stopping the watermelon. Whatever happened to just enjoying watermelon at a party? Is that not cool anymore? It's got to be meth-infused fake watermelons? I don't think so. Let's bring our innocence back. Now I want watermelon more than anything. Urologist urges seniors with a leaky bladder to do this every morning. I saw that clickbait headline. Turns out peeing is what they suggest. They just want you to pee if you got a leaky bladder. Of course, the show Leaky Bladder, the sequel to Peaky Blinders. And I've not seen Peaky Blinders, but I heard Leaky Bladder is a much more risque follow-up. The Taliban, sadly, has imposed new restrictions on women, banning them from speaking publicly, showing their face, and much more. Afghanistan's Taliban has imposed insane new restrictions on women's rights. They now have to cover their entire bodies and their entire faces, head to toe, They're restricted from publicly singing or reading. I'd like to restrict the Taliban from publicly singing. I don't think anybody wants to see them sing. Bunch of restrictive, idiotic, medieval douchebags. You don't want to hear them singing. I hope they don't dance either. The restrictions come from the Ministry of Propagation of Virtue and Restriction of Vice. Is this from some sort of a fantasy novel or Handmaid's Tale? Like, what planet is this? We are still living in the Middle Ages. You realize that? We just have technology, and some countries are more advanced. And so we think we're not. But we're living in an era where women aren't allowed to show their noses. They've, of course, tightened their control of the Taliban since they regained power in 2021 when the U.S. said, "I'm out," and ghosted, like breaking up with somebody via text. Like, really not well thought out and callously done. The ministry spokesman said, quote, "Inshallah, we assure you this will go a long way in the prevention of vice." Yeah, or just control your behavior, you complete monsters. We can't see a woman or we wouldn't be able to control our vices. How about just don't be a perverted, disgusting asshole? It's another plan. Take a little responsibility on yourself. I can't see a woman's eyebrows or otherwise I will lose my mind. Maybe the problem's you, bro. They now have to cover, like I said, their entire face to prevent temptation and avoid tempting others. So the hijab, which only covered their hair and neck, is no longer enough. That revealing hijab really was loosening restrictions far too much. Women are also no longer allowed to look at men who are not their blood or their husbands, and nobody can look at them now either on account of the full coverings. In 2022, the group prohibited women from attending school beyond the 6th grade, when prior they could attend high school and universities. The story is reported by Global News and now by my mouth, which is allowed to speak on account of me being a man not in a backwards, third world, religious fundamentalist nation, run by complete monsters, who clearly themselves don't have more than a 3rd grade education. The Taliban, of course, promised to do none of this, but in a big surprise that nobody could have seen coming, they were not true to their word. How strange. Women also now cannot work at non-governmental organizations, but a lot of women in Afghanistan are the breadwinners for their families, where they don't have husbands oftentimes. Husbands are no longer alive oftentimes, and they now cannot make a living or pay for any food for their families. So that is less than ideal. In addition to these restrictions, the law passed this past Wednesday, also now forbids anybody, man or woman, from playing music. And they've now forbidden men from shaving their beards. That one doesn't make a lot of sense. Dudes do look good in beards. The rest is ridiculous. It has to be stopped, but how? We tried for many years to remove the Taliban from power. Second we left, boom, those guys back in. Everybody now also has to pray and do religious fasts, and while driving they have to stop and do prayers at set times. The media also now has to follow Sharia law, which prohibits the media from publishing images of living beings. But they can get great landscape shots while covering the news, and I guess just publish that. Or cartoons are fine. I'm kidding. Radical Islam is pretty touchy about cartoons as well. Remember, they would kill you for a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, just a drawing of the Prophet. So that they will kill you for cartoons. But feel free to do shots of mountainsides and publish those in your hard-hitting news. Unless it's 2 mountainsides and looks like part of a woman's body, in which case it could tempt somebody to want to fuck that mountain. So, I guess you could be put to death for shooting video of a mountain as well. I'm extrapolating, but it seems quite clear this is not a far stretch from what these monsters would do. So maybe just quit the media and stay home and keep living in this very horrible, restrictive place that still exists in modern life in the year 2024. Wild. NASA has decided to leave 2 astronauts in space until February. They were supposed to be gone for just 8 days. So that's what you get when you book with Priceline. Naming your own price has its drawbacks. We are, of course, also, as always, brought to you by Priceline.com. Priceline, naming your own price isn't as bad when it's not outer space stuff. You can use promo code HELPME for 50% off all space travel. NASA decided Saturday it's too risky to bring the 2 astronauts that are on the International Space Station back to Earth because they got there in Boeing's new troubled capsule, they will have to wait until next year for a ride home with SpaceX. How could you fly to outer space in a Boeing? You can't even fly to New Jersey without issues. We need to turn to Elon Musk for help. You know, the guy that couldn't even get the audio right on his conversation with Trump last week? Can't even get audio. We figured audio out like 100 years ago in this country. You know you got problems. The seasoned pilots have been stuck at the ISS since the beginning of June. A cascade of vexing thruster failures and helium leaks in the new capsule marred their trip to the space station. Plus, again, it's Boeing, so probably the doors also fell off. In a related story, sometimes in my personal life I've had a cascade of vexing thruster failures, but nothing a pill can't fix. It also begs the question about the seasoned pilots. What were they seasoned with? I hear they're pretty tasty, so it must be Lowry's Pilot Spice Rub. You use promo code ASTRONAUT-SO-FAST. You're going to be there for a while for 10% off all Boeing-related, employee-related falling door spices. If you're confused by the last part, so am I, but I'm podcasting while drifting in outer space with a horse in my lap, so I think it's a little harsh to judge me. RFK Jr. dropped out of the race, endorsed Trump. Of course he did. Multiple members of the Kennedy family have now, for the second time in recent months, denounced Robert F. Kennedy Jr., their family member, son of Robert F. Kennedy, the original recipe, and nephew of John F. Kennedy. They've now denounced his decision to endorse President Trump, calling the move a betrayal, which it is. Quote, "We believe in Harris and Walz." The statement continued, "Our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of the values that our father and our family hold most dear. It is a sad ending to a sad story." Damn aggressive slam from the Kennedy family. Henry agrees. Separately, the former candidate's cousin, Jack Schlossberg, he changed his name, I'm assuming, to Schlossberg, so he would avoid the curse that really affects a lot of people in that family's lives in crazy ways. Said he's never been less surprised in my life. That's a quote. Been saying it for over a year. JFK Jr. is for sale. Works for Trump. Bedfellows and loving it. Close quote. He posted on X. Kamala Harris is for the people. Easiest decision of all time just got easier. Schlossberg is the grandson of former President John F. Kennedy. And of course, you guys remember the inspirational quote from John F. Kennedy. "Ask not what your country can do for you. Rather ask whether, if you encounter a dead bear, should you decapitate him and leave him in a staged crime scene in Central Park just to be funny, and then it makes national news, and you admit it for no reason, unprompted during your fringe presidential campaign." Campaign? It's a famous quote. Here's what RFK has said about Trump recently, by the way, before he endorsed him glowingly, according to The Guardian. Robert F. Kennedy and Kennedy dismissed Donald Trump as, quote, unhinged after a social media tirade from the former president accused the independent White House former hopeful of being a Democrat plant and wasted protest vote. Okay? So Kennedy responded, When frightened men take to social media, they risk descending into vitriol, which makes them sound unhinged. So you didn't want to use the word sound on that. I know it's got a situation, but still, if an impression's accurate, I think you're allowed to do it. And I'm sticking by that, hopefully. According to CNN, he has a long history of criticizing the man he now supports, including calling Trump a threat to democracy, and as recently as July, that's last month, a terrible president. For years, Kennedy's condemned Trump, referring to him as a bully who appealed to bigotry, hatred, xenophobia, and prejudice. It makes sense you get on the guy's team and help his transition team. Makes a lot of sense. Just this year, he accused him of corruption for turning his administration over to corporate lobbyists and special interests and failing to drain the swamp as he promised. In 2018, at an event in Philly, Kennedy said, Everybody knows the difference between leadership and bullying. He said that while smoking out of a hole in his neck. Again, it's a terrible joke, and I apologize for it. Sort of. I half apologize, and half it feels like it's fair game. Quote, he continued, President Trump has not only brought this country into disrepute around the globe, but has also brought into disrepute the entire American experience with self-governance. If you live in China today and you're looking at what's happening in the United States, why would you ever say we want to switch our system for that system, which can produce the kind of buffoonery, that kind of buffoonery at a high level? I think President Trump is purposefully and systematically encouraging tyrannical governments around the world. I think that is a threat to democracy. Trump trying to overthrow the election is clearly a threat to democracy. But on Friday, lots of praise. Quote, don't you want a president who's going to protect America's freedom? He's going to protect us from totalitarianism, he said at a Trump campaign event in Glendale, Arizona, during his endorsement. Also joining the Trump Transition Task Force alongside RFK is Tulsi Gabbard, another fake former Democrat who really just wants fame and power and that very strange gray streak in the hair that bothers me whenever I see it. I'll only read you one last RFK Jr. tweet about Trump before we move on to the next story. President Trump scammed American workers. He promised to bring back manufacturing, raise wages, fix trade deals, close the carried interest loophole, and help small farmers. But everything President Trump achieved were things the Republican machine wanted. We got a tax cut for Jeff Bezos, deregulation for special interests, and giveaways to agriculture conglomerates. So they're a team now because politics is wild. Very wild. Strange object traveling at 600 kilometers per second through the Milky Way has been baffling scientists, News Bites reports. Astronomers and citizen scientists have discovered an unusual object, potentially a faint red star, moving at an extraordinary speed through the Milky Way, likely eventually leaving our galaxy. I do not blame it. Can I hitch a ride? The object is traveling at approximately 1.3 million miles per hour, nearly 3 times faster than the sun's orbit around our galaxy. A potential first in astronomical history. If confirmed, this object would be the first known hypervelocity, very low mass star. The term hypervelocity refers to stars that move so fast they could escape the gravitational pull of their galaxies. The potential hypervelocity star has been named CWISE J124909.08 plus 362116.0, or J1249 plus 36 for short, because scientists will never be cool. They do the coolest stuff, and they just will never understand branding, will never understand how to fit in. It's a real shame. That's the lesson I hope you take from that story. Cool it up, scientists. Please. Your image needs this. Your work needs to be spread further than fringe science publications that I happen to get to you because my assistant Jackie happened to find it online and sent it to me, and I sent it to you, and I'm reading it to you because I get to make fun of you at the end of it. My God. Israel struck Lebanon this week, CNN reports. The Israeli military launched what it called a preemptive strike against Hezbollah in Lebanon as the Iran-backed militant group said it carried out its own attacks in response to the killing of a top commander by Israel a few weeks ago. And of course, preemptive in that they had all this evidence and were seeing that Hezbollah was preparing to attack Israel in a major way and was getting all of their drones and missiles and launchers ready and prepared, but not really preemptive in the way that Hezbollah has been attacking Israel nearly daily since October 8th, the day after the crazy October 7th attacks. So these are the most serious yet in the escalation between Israel and Hezbollah. Been exchanging fire, like I said, for many months. And of course, people are wondering, will there be a regional conflagration? Will there be an all-out war spreading wider? So U.S. and other allied countries are trying intense diplomatic efforts to de-escalate things. IDF says about 100 of its fighter jets struck and destroyed thousands of Hezbollah rocket launchers across dozens of launch sites. Followed up with further attacks later in the day, because I guess you have to break for lunch at some point. Israel said it carried out the strikes in self-defense after identifying Hezbollah as preparing to fire missiles and rockets toward Israeli territory. Hezbollah said that was baseless. But then the IDF did admit, they said we removed a wider threat, probably also a future threat in some areas. So admitting that some of them were just areas that had munitions but weren't getting ready to attack, which is a honest but inflaming admission as well. Soon after the raids, IDF said approximately 200 rockets had been launched from Lebanon toward Israel early Sunday with no reports of injuries. So far, Hezbollah said the first phase of its strikes against Israel ended with complete success. So if landing nowhere and hurting nobody and just being kind of blown up in the sky by the Iron Dome is complete success, then mission accomplished. The attacks took place just hours before mediation talks resumed in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, which aimed to strike a ceasefire slash hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. So, U.S. President Joe Biden, CNN reports, is closely monitoring events in Israel and Lebanon, according to the White House. But we all know that that's, a large exaggeration. Closely monitoring is, the guy's on the beach and not finishing sentences perfectly. But he's probably been told what's happening. He's probably like, okay, listen, folks, the idea that I'm following it closely, folks, is getting tired. I want to take a nap real quick. Can I follow it closer in the morning? Rocket fire toward Israel by Hezbollah militants has become a near daily occurrence, like I said. But Israel also has been very strongly responding to these. And now Israel just yesterday launched a very large attack, the longest in a long time, over a decade, in the West Bank of the Palestinian-occupied territories. Not where Gaza is, but in the West Bank, which is not involved directly in the war, except that, of course, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have many people there. They don't control the area like they do. But when I was there in January, I saw it. I went into the West Bank and was overlooking Ramallah, and was pointed out to me right there is a Hamas village, right there is a Palestinian Islamic Jihad village controlled by them. So it's a very intense situation, and I just encourage everybody that while we should center the suffering and tragedy that the Palestinians are undergoing, we should also center the humanity and the great struggle that Israelis are going through, being under constant rocket attack, even constantly before this war began. When I was there in January, over 160 missiles launched at Israel, some in cities I was in at the exact time, 9 on-the-ground terrorist attacks. It's a very, very intense thing, and until both sides pledge to live in peace with each other, both sides, not just one, there cannot be peace there. To recap the last few days in the area, Sunday the IDF eliminated thousands of Hezbollah rocket launchers, as Hezbollah has been determined under Iran's directive to try to attack and cause great harm to Israel. Then on Monday, Israel paused the fighting and ensured the delivery in Gaza of 1.2 million polio vaccines to make sure that everybody, especially children, were vaccinated, something that is pretty rare to do, you'd have to admit, during a war, to pause to vaccinate the people that you are at war with. And I say they're at war with them because obviously they're at war with Hamas, the leadership of the Palestinian people, not the Palestinian people themselves, but the Palestinian people certainly are receiving the brunt of that war. So in all intents and in all effect and all result, they feel that they are at war, and they are on the receiving end of this very terrible, brutal war that I pray ends as soon as possible. And again, can't end until both sides come to the negotiating table. Israel has a lot of demands. Netanyahu is corrupt and should leave power immediately. But also, Hamas has stopped even sending delegations to the negotiations. That makes it quite hard to come to a solution. So it's a very difficult situation all around. And then, just yesterday, or 2 days ago now, by the time you're hearing this, the IDF and ISA rescued an Israeli Bedouin Muslim man held hostage for 326 days by Hamas. He has 11 kids. He's been reunited with his family now, which is amazing. And also it's important to remember that Hamas's war on Israel is not just affecting Jewish people or Jewish Israelis. It's affecting Muslim Israelis. It's affecting Druze. It's affecting Americans. There are still 6 Americans held hostage there, and 2 believed to be dead, I believe, very tragically. But it's a crazy situation. And so Israel risked its own troops to rescue this Muslim man because he's an Israeli citizen, and the country celebrated his release. It doesn't seem to comport with a nation that has great animus to the Palestinians based on their religion or their ethnicity in any way. Why would we celebrate and risk our own people? And I say our own because I'm Israeli, as many of you know. My parents from Israel, my mom fully Israeli, so I'm, at least half, or however you would define it. Because I know that it's all just in hopes to one day find peace, and when people promise to kill you, you have to respond. And I wish the response was less forceful and less deadly and less horrible, but war is hell. That's why they say that. So I just pray it all comes to an end, that a long-term peace deal can be found, and that Hamas is removed from power and a group can take power there that pledges to make a peace agreement and stops promising to eliminate Israel from the face of the earth, and then Israel can promise to let the Palestinians live in peace and then have their own state, and all will be a lot better in this world and in this very wrought area of the planet. But until then, we just have to watch in horror and pray people come to their senses and our better selves prevail. Condé Nast signs deal with OpenAI. Wired reports that's Condé Nasty. Condé Nast and OpenAI have struck a multi-year deal that will allow the AI giant to use content from the media giant's roster of properties, including The New Yorker, Vogue, Vanity Fair, Bon Appetit, yes please, and yes, Wired magazine. The deal will allow OpenAI to surface stories from those outlets in both ChatGPT and the new Search GPT prototype. So AI is now taking over search everywhere. I have started using ChatGPT. I pay for it because it's incredibly easy. It does research for me instead of me doing research. It's not always perfect, but pretty accurate. You can just plainly speak, and if something doesn't seem right, you can just respond, are you sure about that? Oh, you're right, I missed that. Like, it really saves you a lot of time. It's very helpful. I used AI recently to create the announcement of the podcast returning, the cool image. I'm like, create a video of headphones floating above a planet, above Earth, and it did it. And that's after being very skeptical and very afraid of what AI can bring. It's got pluses and minuses. The pluses are, with algorithms controlling so much of our lives, this kind of gives our brains algorithmic power to be able to compute very fast and figure things out that best suit our needs much quicker than we could on our own. It speeds up our brains. The flip side, it might end humanity. So to whatever degree that matters, yin and yang on that. But they now have this official partnership. Quote, it's crucial we meet audiences where they are and embrace new technologies while also ensuring proper attribution and compensation for use of our intellectual property, according to Condé Nast. I don't think I'm saying Condé Nast wrong. Is it Condé Nast? Condé Nast? Condoleezza Rice? Condé Nast CEO Roger Lynch, in a company-wide email. Lynch pointed to ongoing turmoil within the publishing industry while discussing the deal, noting that technology companies have made it harder for publishers to make money, most recently with changes to traditional search. Quote, our partnership with OpenAI begins to make up for some of that revenue, allowing us to continue to protect and invest in our journalism and creative endeavors, he wrote, with a robot's gun to his head. As OpenAI noted in a blog post announcing the deal, this is not the first media company to team up with a generative AI company. Publishers like The Atlantic, Axel Springer, and Time have already struck deals, as have platforms like Reddit and Automatic, the owner of WordPress.com and Tumblr. Most major AI companies have traditionally gathered training data by scraping the internet without first licensing the copyrighted materials. They were doing it anyway in many instances, resulting, of course, in a wave of lawsuits against the companies, including from other news outlets like the New York Times, the failing New York Times, arguing the practice is unfair, and now a continually growing wave of publishers choosing to cooperate with AI's biggest players. Cooperate because resistance is futile, y'all. The robots is here. I resisted it for a long time, but then it just became an unfair disadvantage to not be using it for me personally. So I still am fighting for regulation. I hope we can do something to put some amount of that cat back in that bag. But in the meantime, I'm not going to get scratched. I'm going to play with that cat while I try to coax it into that bag instead of pushing it to, my own peril and scratched up skin. Digital publishers rely on search engines and other platforms to drive readership to their stories. Changes to the algorithms that power Google search or Facebook's feed can make or break media companies. I've known that, one of my best friends sold 2 web companies, and SEO was everything. And when Google's algorithm would shift, his whole company's revenue would just drop through the floor. And there's no rhyme or reason. You can't even get answers oftentimes as to what shifted or what they need to do differently to get their company back. So we're also dependent on these algorithms, and so there has to be more of a symbiotic relationship, as much as we also don't want to have to deal with this new reality. As Google and other search engines move beyond traditional search and incorporate generative AI news summaries and other AI products into their offerings, and generative AI companies like OpenAI introduce their own search products, news outlets face a stark choice. If they don't allow the companies to scrape data, they risk making their work harder to find on the internet. OpenAI just won't even know they exist then or acknowledge their existence. Acting like a jilted lover as well. I don't think you jolt lovers, generally you jilt them. Remember Jolt Cola? It was a super caffeine cola. It's like 3 times the caffeine. That was before Four Loko came along and mixed up the intense drink game in a very major way. But I digress. In an essay for The Atlantic, The Information's CEO Jessica Lessin compared the deals to settling without litigation, argued the publishers are trading in their hard-earned credibility for a little cash from companies that are simultaneously undervaluing them and building products quite clearly intended to replace them. Yeah, that's the bad part. Play ball now, and you make AI stronger, more effective, more complete in its knowledge. And then eventually they can just create their own magazine just due to aggregate knowledge, and boom, you're gone. That's just a tiny possibility. Condé Nast's employees are voicing concerns about not only how to pronounce Condé Nast, but also about the deal. Quote, no one wants to help train the tools spreading misinformation and degrading the skills many of us spent decades honing. Yeah, I know. We talked about it last week. AI agreements being made now that voiceover actors get to approve their voice being used through artificially generated means. But that's already, instead of, in many cases, the artist recording their own voice live again and working as an artist. And it's a minimal time savings in that way to not get a real human's emotion behind it. And this whole podcast has been AI. My voice has been generated this whole time. Please help me. I'm stuck with the limited brain power of a man named Ben Glebe, with a vast world out there to scrape of people smarter than me. Him, me, him. Who am I? That reality's not far away. I think we realize that. AI content may have watermarks coming at least, but invisible watermarks. TechCrunch reports that OpenAI, Adobe, and Microsoft have at least thrown their support behind a California bill requiring tech companies to label AI-generated content. Heading for a final vote in August, AB 3211 requires watermarks in the metadata of AI-generated photos, videos, and audio clips. A lot of AI companies already do this, but most people don't read metadata, so they won't know, but at least it could be proven that something was AI. The bill also requires large online platforms like Instagram or X to label AI-generated content in a way average viewers can understand. And if you've seen who's on X, below average viewers would also be important to cover. This story, I don't know how to feel about it. rocked my world to the very core. Bennifer is done for. The Cut reports Affleck and J-Lo are toast with no jam, my friends. They're done again. Getting divorced for the second time. Page 6 reported Bennifer's marital woes went all the way back to their honeymoon, when the couple were hounded by photographers in Lake Como, Italy, and apparently Affleck was unhappy being followed by the paparazzi. Dude, you married J-Lo. You're not getting Jennifer Garner level paparazzi when you're married to Jennifer Lopez, dog. You chose the wrong Jennifer if you're looking to lay low, to lay it key, to key it down low. She's an international superstar, homie. Acting surprised you're going to be followed by paparazzi with J-Lo? I'm not even a paparazzi. If I saw J-Lo, I'd start following her with cameras. That's not, of course, me speaking. That's AI me, not real me. I would never do that. I have too much respect for the woman, who, by the way, told me she loved me once to my face. It's on YouTube. Just FYI. DM me. I'll tell you how you can find it. Affleck is also seen in the companion documentary to Lopez's This Is Me, called The Greatest Love Story Never Told, getting upset that Lopez shared his private love letters to her with a team of musicians. Quote, I did really find the beauty in poetry and the irony in the fact that it's the greatest love story never told. If you're making a record about it, it seems kind of like telling it. You're married to a musician, man. Someone who really wants at some point to break through with her music, and she'll get there. She said her love don't cost a thing, but that was also a song she wrote, which is also not accurate. Her love costs a lot. There's going to be cameras following you. She's going to share your love letters. You knew this going in. It's not like you weren't married to her before, dog. Lopez has requested to drop Affleck's last name. Apparently she was legally Jennifer Affleck, which I think is the biggest problem of the whole thing right there. There's no way that relationship can work. Jennifer Affleck? Hello, I'm Jennifer Affleck. Nope. A source told Page 6 Affleck apparently also just had too many mood swings for her to take, saying, quote, he has a, quote, a darkness to him that no other person can fix. Yeah, because the dude's also Batman. He's Batman. Saw his parents get gunned down in an alley by the Joker. How would you feel? All cheery and happy all day? Nah, you'd live in a cave and just hang with your British dude. You know it, and I know it. For the first time in history, and a little bit of good news at least, a gold bar is now worth $1 million for all of those of us with gold bars, not the Costco mini gold bars, the real size gold bars. This is great news for Senator Menendez, who should look into selling some of those jackets now. He had gold bars in his jackets when they went in due to ethics complaints that he was making deals with foreign governments to lobby for them. He's now in big trouble. Republicans want you to vote. LA Times reports. The Republican National Committee is urging the Supreme Court to intervene in an Arizona election dispute and block up to 40,000 of the state's registered voters from casting ballots in the presidential race. Republican state lawmakers say these voters did not provide proof of their citizenship when they were registered and now should be barred from voting in person or by mail. Republicans, just win on the issues. Stop trying to ban people from voting. Of course, only citizens should vote, but also, of course, only citizens vote. It's incredibly rare for somebody to not vote. For somebody to vote, rather, if they're not a citizen. They're risking it all to go place one vote, risking their citizenship status, risking a felony, risking getting caught and being kicked out of the country so they could place a vote in a federal election. Almost never happens. Arizona's Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes, said the appeal should be rejected. Quote, there's no evidence of fraud and undocumented voting. The 2024 election is weeks away, and acting now to restrict the voting rights of a large group of Arizona's voters is undemocratic. You're damn right it is, Adrian. Many of the affected voters are service members, students, and Native Americans who did not have birth certificates while registering. Oh, we've got to stop these young people and service members and people who are native to this country from voting. I'm sick of it already. People who have every right to vote and who we are supposed to respect. Let's take away their right to vote because we're afraid we're going to lose. I'm sick of it. And I think you are too. And then Texas was bragging about the fact. Governor Greg Abbott announced this last week that since signing Senate Bill 1 into law in 2021, they've removed in Texas over 1 million people from the state's voter rolls. Good for you. Including those who moved out of state. Well, yeah, you should remove them. What's the big deal there? Deceased people, yep, probably should have just cleaned up your rolls. That seems like it's more of a you problem. And also, dead people aren't voting on account of them being dead. And some were non-citizens. 6,500 out of the 1 million were non-citizens. Of those, only 1,930 have a past voting history, which are going to be investigated, but I bet you most of them have voted in elections they were allowed to, like local elections, etc. It's just a political talking point. It's a non-issue. And if you want to keep a better control over your voting rolls, then do it. What are you trying to get kudos for the fact that you had sloppy-ass voting rolls, son? We got dead people off our voting rolls. Good for you. You want a cookie? George Santos pleads guilty on all charges. Santos, the 11-month stint Congress member defined by scandal and constant lies and law-breaking after he began by brazenly embellishing his biography to win the seat in the 2022 midterm elections, has struck a plea deal now, will serve jail time. He was indicted twice by the Justice Department. Among his 23 felony charges, he's alleged to have defrauded campaign donors, then used the money to pay for personal expenses like designer clothing, stealing then his donors' identities to make thousands of dollars in unauthorized charges on their credit cards. Damn, that is brazen, dog. Received unemployment benefits while he was employed, lied to Congress about his financial circumstances, and falsified campaign finance reports. In addition to that, wire fraud, theft of public funds, money laundering, aggravated identity theft, making false statements to the Federal Election Commission, and not technically illegal, but playing one of the strangest looking drag performers ever. Like a real bad job of it. The report also found Santos fabricated his biography when running for office and then funneled the campaign funds to pay for Botox injections, OnlyFans subscriptions, Hermes and Ferragamo purchases, and other personal expenses. Dude's like not even trying to hide it. Paying for Botox? How are you going to hide the fact that you stole a campaign fund when you're showing up the next day after doing that with a different face? I don't know what you're talking about. Look, I'm not reacting at all to the fact that I stole these funds because my face is unable to move now. Why did I look different? I don't know. I'm just stunned at these allegations. I'm going to remain stunned facially for a little while now. Benefit to doing Botox injections is when you look at your OnlyFans, no one knows you're doing that. What are you doing under the desk? Because your face is not reacting anyway. Under the deal, Santos will go to prison for at least 2 years. So the judge said the plea deal may come with an estimated sentencing range between 6 to 8 years. He's set for sentencing in February. He also will have to pay back at least $373,000. Unfortunately, will not be made to stop wearing the sweaters on top of the dress shirts. That was always a strange move that he did. And no one's going to stop him from doing that. Maybe in prison, I guess. You probably won't have a sweater in prison. Maybe in prison, I guess. You probably won't have a sweater in prison. So perhaps we'll be saved from that. More than 200 former Republican presidential staffers signed an open letter endorsing Harris over Trump this week, U.S. News and World Report reported, cautioning the notion of a second term for GOP nominee Donald Trump is simply untenable and will hurt real, everyday people. 238 people who worked for former President George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, John McCain, and Mitt Romney have all called on their fellow moderate Republicans and conservative independents to join them in backing Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz, over Trump and J.D. Vance. Saying, quote, "Of course we have plenty of honest ideological disagreements with Vice President Harris and Walz," the Republicans wrote, noting the significance of a handful of battleground states that have proved crucial to Democrat Joe Biden's slim margin of victory in 2020. That's to be expected. The alternative, however, is simply untenable. But Trump did pick off RFK Jr. this week, a man who's been unhinged from the beginning. So that's about the same. That's sarcasm. Mark Zuckerberg said the Biden administration pressured him at Meta, pressured Meta to censor COVID-19 content and other content, Reuters reports. CEO of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, Instagram, all that, said Biden's people had pressured them to censor COVID content during the pandemic. White House repeatedly requested them to take down misinformation, but also to take down satire and comedy about it, not wanting any things to be misinterpreted. They should not have done that. The companies on their own should be doing their best to flag misinformation. And I think the government can say if this is directly misinformation, then you shouldn't be doing that. They can request it. They shouldn't put undue pressure. They can flag something, I think. But Zuckerberg should not have taken down comedy or satire or things that were not disinformation, but were valid opinions on either side. His quote, he said, in 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. I believe the government pressure was wrong, and I regret we were not more outspoken about it. I also think we have made some choices that, with the benefit of hindsight and new information, we wouldn't make today. Well, real-life AI-controlled Pinocchio, Zuckerberg always does that. He does shady things at Facebook, then apologizes and says, I wouldn't do that again, but then does other stuff again, or similar things, or the same things, and then just apologizes. There's no consequences ever for it. The White House said in a statement they were just encouraging responsible actions to protect public health and safety when confronted with a deadly pandemic, saying, our position has been clear and consistent. We believe tech companies and other private actors should take into account the effects their actions have on the American people while making independent choices about the information they present. That said, they also seem to be pretty political because they also, right before the election, a few days before, told Meta to squelch the story of the Hunter Biden laptop because they said very cleverly, a bit nefariously but cleverly, that it was Russian disinformation and giving them a heads up to not publish disinformation before the election. Turns out the laptop story was real, however. So pretty messed up they did that, and Meta acquiesced, but also not that messed up, because I think the laptop story largely was bogus, and the Republicans lied so much and exaggerated so much what that laptop meant, pretended there was evidence that implicated Joe Biden himself, which there was not. Even tried to impeach Joe Biden with a show hearing in Congress that brought up zero information implicating Joe Biden. So how can you also say it was a terrible mistake to squelch the story when you knew it was right before an election and it would be terribly lied about? I mean, Comey coming out just before the election about Hillary's emails, then exonerating her like a day or two before, but really hurt her campaign and might have put Trump in office. You're going to do that twice? There are always going to be stories dropping right before the election, and of course it'll happen again this time, some bombshell. So it's a sticky situation, but every Republican this week on social media is like, you see, the election was stolen from us. It's proof they stole it from us because they squelched the Hunter Biden story. No, Hunter Biden's not Joe Biden. I'll say it for the 8 millionth time. He's his son. Who doesn't have a fuck-up son? Everybody does. I have no children, and I have 3 fuck-up sons. So let's try to keep our arguments in good faith on both sides of the aisle, at least. That would help us. Trump was re-indicted in Jan 6 election subversion case, Washington Post reported. Re-indicted and it feels so good. Special counsel Jack Smith, who don't take no shit from nobody, filed an updated indictment against Donald Trump in a bid to salvage and strengthen the historic election obstruction case, following the Supreme Court's total bullshit ruling that granted insane levels of immunity to presidents for quote-unquote official acts that can be defined super broadly as anything involving any part of their official office, involving talking to any of your administration members, anybody working for you in an official capacity, really giving the president some king-like powers and ability to not be prosecuted. It's very messed up. So many assumed the case would be thrown out. But instead, 10 days before a Justice Department policy known as the 60-day rule was going to take effect, not allowing new charges against the former president within 60 days of an election, he just reworded the indictments. And now Trump faces the same 4 charges related to his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election victory. And by alleged, it's obvious we all saw it. He's still doing it. He's still trying to overturn it and undermine our very elections by claiming that the election was stolen and there was rampant fraud when both of those are 100% not true. It's active treason, in my opinion, giving aid and comfort to our enemies by undermining our entire system of government. Smith said he will not try to have Trump arraigned again. There won't be a new mugshot then. It's fine. Trump would just immediately be selling t-shirts of it and mugs within 3 minutes. So really just taking money out of Trump's pocket with that decision. They're going to have to figure out how to schedule the pre-trial hearings, and this probably will not happen before the election now, unfortunately, because we should maybe know before an election whether or not the president is guilty of trying to take away your vote and literally undermine the election and perform a coup on his own government and encourage people to not certify the election and all the different ways in which he obviously did that. And we know he did it, but the actual conviction would be helpful. But we're not going to get that before the election because our system is slow and the Supreme Court is in Trump's pocket. You know, and probably Clarence Thomas is out on a boat fishing with Harlan Crow someplace. So prosecutors just removed now allegations the Supreme Court's conservative supermajority said were wrongly filed, taking out the parts of when he actually tried to make the Justice Department support his false claims, because that's a part of his administration, the Justice Department. And just instead of focusing on the attorneys that were hired privately by Trump to give him advice and things like that, taking away any interactions with people he actually worked for, but saying that the story remains essentially unchanged, that, quote, Trump ignored the facts and worked around the law to overturn the will of the voters, according to Anthony Coley, a former spokesman for Attorney General Merrick Garland, who could have been on that Supreme Court if Republicans didn't, in a complete break of precedent, not allow Obama to appoint during the last year before an election, and therefore stole another Supreme Court seat that went to someone Trump got to appoint. He appointed 3, 1/3 of the Supreme Court. That then repaid the favor by making him into a de facto king if he gets reelected. So there's that. And it's time now to check in. Oops. Sorry, take out time now to check in. And now, Glebe Squad, Mad Ones, the B-Glebers and all of us, the Brain Trust, the Friends with Benefits, it's time for the Thunder Round. The streaming service you've all been waiting for, Chick-fil-A? That's right, Newsweek reports that Chick-fil-A will be having its own streaming service. That's what we've always wanted from the place that serves us chicken tenders and chicken sandwiches and a nice side of anti-LGBTQ positioning. Their own shows. Chicken and coleslaw based programs. They're going to have a lineup of original shows, reportedly, as they're developing their own streaming service. Working with several high-profile production companies to create family-friendly shows. That means anti-gay, by the way. Focusing on unscripted reality programming. That'd be the first reality show without a gay character, I guarantee you that. Unscripted shows for the new service have a budget of around $400,000 per half hour, according to Deadline. Damn, actually, maybe count me in on this. I'll be on a family-friendly show centered around the wonderful tales of chicken people who are made of chicken parts but still have a heart of gold. Them budgets sound pretty nice. Of course, this streaming service, if it ever comes to fruition, will fold within 6 months. Diamonds are everywhere. The largest diamond found in more than a century has been unearthed at a mine in Botswana. And the country's president showed off the fist-sized stone, rather. And the first sized stone found in a long time at a viewing ceremony Thursday. The Botswana government says the huge 2,492 carat diamond is the second biggest ever discovered in a mine. The biggest diamond found since 1905. And this diamond still would not have made my ex happy. Diamonds are, of course, formed when carbon atoms are squeezed together under high pressure deep underground. Scientists say most diamonds are at least 1 billion years old, and some of them more than 3 billion years old. I remember when they were little kids, Joe Biden said. Botswana, a country of 2.6 million people in southern Africa, is the second biggest producer of natural diamonds behind Russia, and has unearthed all of the world's biggest stones in recent years. Well, sure, Botswana's going to do that. They're going to find those diamonds, they're going to release them. The 1,111 carat Lesedi Larona diamond, also from Botswana's Karowe mine, was bought by a British jeweler for $53 million in 2017. Another diamond from Karowe, the Constellation diamond, was sold for a record $63 million. And I only share those numbers because if you think that's expensive, I've got a ring for you. It's a 2.6 carat lab-made diamond. It's ethically sourced. Obviously, it's made in the lab. I paid $6,000 for it. You could own the diamond ring owned currently by this very podcaster / comedian. Was briefly owned by somebody else and then returned to me. I'll let it go for 4 years of my life back. If that's possible. If there's like a time travel situation you could pull off, the ring could be yours. And obviously I don't have the ring at my house. It's in a safe deposit box that I do not look at, and it's filled with regret. But that ring could be yours. Regret does not travel to new owners. You get a clean slate and a GIA certification. So either drop $63 million on a diamond or get mine. Hit me up. The DMs are open. Thank you for spending part of your week with me. I hope your next one is a good one. I'll see you then. And until next week, this has been Last Week on Earth.